Okay, good morning. My name is David Blackwell. I'm David Blackwell. I am Dean of the Gatton College of Business and Economics, and I'm also a professor of finance. And along with Sharon Locke, who's an interim associate dean from the College of Nursing, we are co-chairing the working group number 2 on the See Tomorrow strategic plan, the portion dealing with graduate and professional education. We are hosting these sessions, for several reasons. One is to just kind of inform you of the process and where we are and how we're formulating the plan. And then secondly, and most importantly, is to get your input on the plan where it stands today. And so it's very important, even if you're watching this on video, that you feel free to reach out to Karen, or to Sharon, or to me, or you can use the See Tomorrow at UKY.edu email address, or you can upload things on upload comments on the strategic planning website. And I'll put the email addresses up at the very end of the presentation. I think it's absolutely fine with me if you ask questions during the course of the talk. Sharon is here. We have some other committee members present, and we'll do our best to try to answer any questions that come up along the way, so we don't have to wait until I get through all of the slides to have any discussion. I do want to just take a minute to plug our working group a little bit. You'll see a list of the names eventually. This has been an intense semester. It's a lot of work serving on this working group, and I just want to commend my colleagues on the working group for putting in all the hours, giving us the feedback that we need to respond to the itinerary of this plan promptly. We've had countless meetings, almost countless forums, and I think that those of you probably have colleagues serving on other working groups are going through a similar experience. It's been very intense, and so I hope that you will take a moment to thank your colleagues that have been working on this plan. I can't say it's really a labor of love, but it's certainly been fun. We've learned a lot, and it has brought us together. So please do thank your colleagues that are serving. A little bit about the process. This slide has been presented at a lot of the forums. It's been up online quite a bit. I don't want to go through it point by point, but essentially the way it's worked is our working group has formulated kind of initial ideas based on a lot of research, a lot of data that we have had access to. This process started back in November, December for us, and we started with developing a list of strengths and challenges and opportunities for graduate education. And then we turned to strategies, and then we turned to tactics, and now we're looking at metrics. So at each stage of the process, even early on, we were trying to solicit input from the community, and so even before this formal set of forums started, we were engaging the DGSs and the associate deans for graduate studies in email contact and surveys, and we even hosted a forum specifically for them before these broader forums started happening. So we have attempted to stay in touch with the community as we developed our work. And then what would happen is we would send our material, our ideas, to what's called an integration committee. The integration committee really takes that material and puts it together for us in a coherent format. And then they send it back to us to edit and to comment on and to circulate among our colleagues to get input. And so we've been going back and forth in that process for much of the semester. And at least the way it's worked in our group is that Sharon and I, as the co-chairs, solicit input from our committee members, and we also gather what input we have at that time that's coming from these forums, and we sit down and go point by point to determine whether we need to make a change or an addition to the document, or whether we just need to take that information, set it aside. It doesn't get thrown away. We just set it aside and make it available to the integration committee and the steering committee, because a lot of those ideas are good ideas. Some of them are not in the category of strategies or tactics. They're more in the category of implementation ideas. Some of them are actually beyond the scope of our process. So for example, there's been a lot of ideas coming out about the role of the graduate school, for example. And while we do have some commentary in certain parts of our document about the role of the graduate school, that's more on the side of implementation as opposed to what our strategies and tactics should be. So that information that we're gathering from the forums that isn't specifically getting into the document is being preserved, and the integration committee, will get that information, and then once the plan is complete and implementation starts, those ideas will then be shared with the implementation committee, because a lot of the ideas really center around implementation. I will say that our group, in addition to this more general forum, we sort of divided and conquered the campus, so to speak. So we created, I think, somewhere around 6 or 7 different forums for smaller groups of faculty, staff, or students. And we tried to divide those among the academic units that sort of had similar types of graduate programs. So those forums have been happening over the last few weeks, and actually are continuing through next week. So you may have gotten an invitation for one of those as well. We also hosted a forum for graduate students and also for professional degree program students. So we're just, again, trying to reach the entire constituency, gather the input, and if it haven't reflected appropriately in the plan, or if it's not directly reflected in the plan, we at least communicate it to the provost and to the integration committee so that they can consider that information as they finalize it. So I'll pause for a minute and see if there's any questions about the process that we've been going through. Great. I already talked about the working group. Again, the focus is on advancing a high-quality graduate and professional education portfolio. These are some of the elements that we've talked about in our group, not exclusively, and not all of these are touched on in the same degree in our draft plan, but we're trying to consider the program quality, student quality, and diversity, the campus experience, and then the outcomes, the post-graduation and placement outcomes. And you'll see a lot of these, in particular, these three reflected in our metrics and our tactics. I've talked about the integration committee. So the integration committee is really trying to make the document a coherent whole that kind of reads in the same voice. Is trying to eliminate redundancies across the different working groups, just make the document more efficient. So and they're doing some copy editing. So it's really nice to have that integration committee. They really make us look a lot better than we are doing ourselves. So I won't belabor these. There are a number of strengths, challenges, and opportunities that were developed by our group. We had a long list of these things. Of course, they ended up getting whittled down. All of these are documented in the trends and challenges document that's been floating out there for a couple of months now. So I'm not going to go through all of these. I will touch on a few high points as we get to specific discussion of our strategy. But there is a very lengthy, I think it's over 100 pages of a trends and challenges document that touches on all of the areas in the strategic plan. Very well documented with data and research. So if you have any questions about these strengths, challenges, or opportunities, I refer you to that document. I think that I'll focus a little bit on the challenges, and I'll show some data to illustrate some of these. Most of this centers around resources. Of course, what is the real purpose of a strategic plan? I mean, it is to guide the allocation of resources. It's not always money, sometimes it's time, but we need a broad set of guidelines at the university level to help us figure out where resources should be directed. Allergy season. I want that edited out, please. And so I'll touch on these in more detail in a minute, but you know, we face resource constraints is the bottom line, and with that as the backdrop, there have been some trends both in UK and nationally that we're following. So number one, there seems to be an uptick or an upward trend in enrollment nationwide in master's programs and professional degree programs relative to traditional research-oriented programs. Now, part of that, I think a lot of that is economic pressure. There tends to be a higher ROI for an individual student on a professional degree versus a research degree. And part of that is just supply and demand, and I'll touch on that in a little while. But for sure, we know that there are a shrinking number of faculty positions nationally. And so demand for PhDs for faculty positions is going down dramatically. But the overall trend in demand for doctoral, research doctoral degrees, PhD degrees, is trending down slightly, but a lot of students are also getting work in industry, in government, in nonprofit settings. And so the overall unemployment of doctoral graduates is pretty low. So what our plan tries to address is, you know, given that changing landscape of where doctoral students are placing, should we be doing things differently in how we train them and prepare them for the workplace? So that's one thing. The other is that when you look at the traditional research doctorate, the funding sources that we traditionally use for those programs, primarily for stipends and scholarships, has been declining. And I'll demonstrate that in a little while. And so, but yet at UK, we've at least kind of maintained or slightly increased our enrollment in doctoral programs. And I'm speaking mainly about research-oriented doctoral programs as opposed to professional doctoral programs like MD or DES, those sorts of things. So I'll show you some statistics on that. And then at the same time, we see this trend nationally of increasing demand for master's and professional degrees. Yet at UK, what we've seen over the last several years is actually a decline in master's enrollments. Now, some of that decline is accounted for some conversion of what used to be master's programs into professional doctoral programs. And nursing is one example of that, where they took a MS in nursing and converted it to a PMP program. And that caused some shift in the university's overall numbers. So that's certainly in a backdrop. But nonetheless, I mean, even in the Gatton College, we faced a real challenge with master's enrollments. We've been struggling to maintain MBA enrollments, for example, and a lot of that is just driven, you know, by emphasis on our part, as well as the economy. And so what we're trying to do is to look at adding some professional master's programs that maybe can reach the demand that we're sensing out there. And I'll speak more about the benefits of doing that in a few minutes. And then opportunities that again, I mentioned this opportunity. We've got a national interest in professional programs.
our Kentucky student population, the demographics are not strong. So in terms of numbers, so we, as we probably heard the president talk about nationally the demographics for students coming into a traditional four-year education, that pool is not growing as it used to. So it's going to be more competitive. But yet we've got a more diverse interest, let me say, for types of programs. So that the more specialized graduate programs seem to be in greater demand than more traditional broader ones. And then specifically, we see opportunity in multidisciplinary programs. So in some of the research that we digested, we find opportunity for really strong multidisciplinary programs, especially those where there's funding available. And there tends to be external funding available for these broader multidisciplinary efforts than more narrow ones, as we're looking at that landscape right now. So we've distilled all of this down into three actions in the face of these trends. Number one, more effectively use our existing resources to improve the quality and focus of research-oriented doctoral education. Number two, grow our master's and professional degrees with quality. And I want to emphasize on this second point, when we say professional degrees, we're not just talking about master's degrees, we're talking about all of the professional degrees at the doctoral level and at the master's level. And then, and overall, in all of these programs, more of a focus on student success. And in a professional degree program, that generally tends to take care of itself. So, in programs like nursing or the MBA or medicine or dentistry, there are pretty strong enrichment activities that go along with developing those students professionally and helping them to manage their careers. Perhaps not so much in some other areas, and especially for a student in a doctoral program, a research-oriented doctoral program that may be thinking about going to industry as opposed to academics. We tended as academics to train these students in our own image, and most of us want our doctoral students to go on to great things as an academic. But we have to face the reality that a higher proportion of our students are going into industry. And I think of the doctoral graduates at UK, 30%, right, I guess last year, I think 30% of our students were not going into academics, they were going into industry. So that's a lot of our doctoral students going into industry. Perhaps they need some additional enrichment activity and professional development to help them better succeed in that context versus academics. So I mentioned, excuse me, just a minute. I just want to highlight that the challenge that we're facing with funding, and these are the traditional sources of funding graduate education. And I've broken it up between the research doctoral programs and the master's and professional degree programs. And so no big surprise, state appropriations is a big source of that. We're down $60 million, almost $60 million since 2008. Our grant contracts are down by almost $72 million since 2013. And then philanthropy philanthropy is a challenge for graduate education relative to undergraduate education, but in addition to that, the financial meltdown in 2007, 2008, while we were recovering from that, we haven't fully recovered. So the endowments, are still not putting out what they need to keep up with demand. So that you'll see in a minute that source of funding is down. And then the master's and professional degrees tend to be more driven by tuition fees relative to the doctoral programs. And in fact, a lot of professional degree programs price themselves relative to the market. And that's not always That's not always meaning that prices are going up. I mean, for the MBA degree, we try to track our pricing with our market competition, and we charge a lot more for that degree than just the standard graduate degree that you pay. And some of the other programs, such as medicine, dentistry, and law, have their pharmacy, for example, have their own pricing structure that's based on market demand. Sometimes that means that those programs actually can't raise their tuition as much as we might raise undergraduate tuition, for example. So those programs have to be market responsive. Excuse me again. But they also tend to be more self-supporting than the research-oriented doctoral programs. And this actually, the finding the right niche, a professional program or a master's program where you can price it with a premium and meet some of that increasing demand for master's and professional enrollment, I think in some academic units creates an opportunity to generate revenue, especially under the coming new budget model, that can then be reinvested into other programs in the unit, including doctoral studies. And that's, at least in my college, the approach I'm taking is to look for niches where I can add professional master's programs that are charging a premium price and delivering those programs in an efficient manner, still focusing on quality, but just because of the market demand, making a surplus, if you will, on those programs so that I can then reinvest in doctoral stipends, among other things. And so that's I think a model that a lot of units might be able to think about in the coming implementation of the new budget model. I think it will actually favor that. In that model, there's actually a benefit to having a master's program that's priced at the market, because more of that revenue is retained by the unit offering the working programs. There's less of a tax, if you will, by the central administration on that kind of program in the model. So that also creates an incentive and an opportunity. So let me address some of these things with some data. This shows our doctoral enrollments since 2005 and the number of degrees awarded. You know, overall we are up, and I would just characterize since 2011, you know, pretty flat. But certainly compared to 6-7 years ago, we are up a fair amount. So what's happened in the market at that time, and this chart has been somewhat controversial, but it's based on some data that was collected by NSF, and then it's been reported on in various media outlets, including Atlantic Monthly, and I think The Economist also reported on some of this data. This is showing PhD employment at graduation, and basically the blue line is the proportion of students that actually have a job at graduation, the proportion that have nothing, and the proportion that are going on for some kind of postdoctoral study. Now, what this masks is the fact that a fairly low proportion of PhDs compared to other types of graduates don't tend to have a job at graduation. It may be several months after graduation before they actually land in something that they want to do. And so this doesn't capture that. And as I mentioned earlier, this doesn't break out the employment between academics and non-academic roles. But we do know the demand for academic roles is in steep decline. Yet this trend, and I'm focusing on this blue line mainly, this downward trend in that proportion, at least to me, is not signaling an increase in demand for PhDs. Even though PhDs have low unemployment, we're definitely seeing a softening in the demand as I look at these figures. So we've got the more doctoral students than we used to have, yet demand is softening. But we have been trying to increase our budgeted scholarships. And so when you see budgeted graduate professional scholarships, basically what we're talking about there is what is referred to by some as being tuition waivers. Well, I can assure you that the university is not waiving any tuition. The tuition is budgeted. And so, you know, there are resources, there are real resources that go into doctoral education and a lot of overhead to support doctoral education. And all of that has to be covered with real money. So, so when you see this amount going up, it is a real investment, and the university gets benefit back from it, right? I mean, the doctoral students do a lot of teaching and on this campus, and they do a lot of research on this campus. So I'm not trying to paint a picture that, you know, that the benefit of doctoral education isn't outweighing the cost. I'm just pointing out that it represents an investment of real resources. And in fact, I think our committee agrees. I think the university leadership agrees that doctoral education is an integral part of us continuing to be a strong research university. So there's and I don't think there's any doubt about emphasis on us remaining a strong research institution. And of course, doctoral education is a strong part of that. Doctoral students also contribute greatly to the undergraduate mission. And then just think about attracting and retaining faculty. If we don't have strong doctoral programs and good doctoral students, it's really hard to retain and attract good faculty members that are going to do the research that we want. So the question isn't, you know, how much emphasis we should put on doctoral education. I think we need to put high emphasis on it. The question I have is, we got to find a better way to pay for it. And so there's no doubt that we want to pay for it. A lot of what's going into this plan is just thinking about how we can pay for it. You can see that, and these are expenditures on fellowships, so this is over and above the stipends or the tuition scholarships. So we have been trying to keep up. We all know that our stipends are, based on some data we have, our stipends on average are lining up okay with some of our peer institutions, but in certain areas they're way behind. And there's a lot of variation in that across campus. And certainly that's something we want to address. You know, one idea that we throw out there is, well, when resources are tight and you want to emphasize quality, maybe you don't admit as many doctoral students as you do in the past, and load them up with a good package and get the very best to come here. Certainly, that's a defensive strategy in the short term, but as we think about how we generate sustainable resources for doctoral education, that's certainly something that we should all think about. So anyway, this is starting to trend downward. The reason here has to do with the endowment, but also the budget cuts that we've experienced back in 2012. Yeah, 2012. Those budget cuts hit everybody on campus and hit the graduate school as well. The graduate school has been trying to keep up by spending down fund balances. So the graduate school did have some fund balances, so for a while they've been able to maintain, or at least not cut as much, some of their programs, but those balances are now getting exhausted. And that hasn't been helped, by the way, by the decline in grants and contracts, because if you think about one funding source for the graduate school is the F&A that the Vice President for Research transfers every year to the graduate school. Well, that pool of money is shrinking because our grants and contracts are shrinking. And again, we've been piecing it together as a university with fund balances, just trying to hang on until things turn around. So that's been a real challenge. So we're trying to keep our head above water, but we still need to think about how we optimize our resources going forward. And of course, this is not a good sign. Endowment fellowships from endowment spending declining again. This is a vestige of the financial crisis. It's also an indication that, and I've learned this as a dean, a lot of donors, you know, they don't get all fired up about funding PhD fellowships. It's really hard case to make, and you try to make it, but you know, they'd rather see, you know, their money go to some poor, you know, some poor kid from Western Kentucky and help them pull themselves up by their bootstraps. That's a more compelling story for a lot of our alumni who are donors. So I think we've got to, as deans, and I'll put this on the deans and our development team at the university, we've got to think about better ways of pitching support for graduate programs to our donors. And that's an educational process of helping our donors understand the critical nature of doctoral and graduate education to the overall enterprise. Because if we're going to, you know, as the president has articulated, if we're going to be a top residential research university, we need that dynamic set of graduate programs to make that all come together. This is a big one. So we fund a lot of the healthcare for our doctoral students that are on funding, and you can see what's happened to the cost. This is $722,000 back in 2009. It's now up to $2.2 million. That's a huge fight, and again creates an additional challenge for us. And then I mentioned the declining enrollment in master's degrees. Admittedly, some of what's masked here are some programs like the nursing program I mentioned, where there's decreasing, maybe a shift at UK at least away from some master's programs into professional doctoral programs. And so we admit that, but this is still kind of going against a national trend in which we see enrollment in these programs going up. So let me just pause for a minute and see if there's any questions about the data I presented before I get into the actions. I'm not going to read all this stuff, I promise. Yeah, but it's been put out there for you to digest. I will just hit a few of the high points. So I'm sorry you can't read the top of this, but essentially this action is to more effectively more effectively
use our resources.
More effectively use our resources to improve the quality and focus of research-oriented doctoral education. So, essentially what we're promoting here is let's find a way to fund doctoral education that's sustainable. Let's look at it, from a realistic perspective in the marketplace. Where is the demand? Where should we be going? Where is the external funding coming from for doctoral education? We've got to be more nimble in thinking about our doctoral programs, and in particular multidisciplinary programs where there seems to be a lot more external funding for these big multidisciplinary initiatives, and I think that is also being reflected in the working group on research. And so if you think about that group's work and this group's work, it should, with respect to doctoral education anyway, it should be lining up. One challenge that I didn't touch on is just, and we had our working group meet yesterday. Now I'll just digress just for a moment. There's quite an infrastructure here for getting new courses and new programs approved or to change existing programs. Meaning, of course, you're going to work within your academic unit with the department chairs, DGSs, the faculty to enhance your program. But then once it gets out of the building, you've got to go to the graduate council. in a lot of cases, or this healthcare
Colleges Council.
Healthcare Colleges Council in some cases. You get through that, you've then got to go through about 3 levels of committees at the University Senate. The University Senate is overworked. And so, I've heard horror stories that it could take a couple of years to get a new program or certificate approved. Now, that is not, that's not something that's under the purview of our plan. We can't tell the University Senate how to do their work. But I think they are of the mind and of the spirit to collaborate and to study ways to improve their processes so that as a university we can be more nimble in responding to these forces. And that's just going to be a necessary requirement for us to respond quickly. So create a sustainable model. That might mean, in some cases, and again, this is going to vary by academic unit, but I'm trying to promote to my department chairs and EGSs, hey, my management department lost 2 great PhD students they were trying to recruit because of money. And I said, well, maybe we should just combine the money you have into fewer slots and really attract a couple of star students instead of trying to find 5 students. Let's find 3 that are really good. And I'm relatively new here. What I found is there's a mentality here that there are what are referred to as positions. And I guess I don't think of positions. I think that the dean or department chair or DGS, you've got a pot of money. And there's really not many restrictions on how you divide that pot of money up. So I think we just need to start thinking more creatively about combining so-called positions, enhancing them from whatever source we can, scholarships, fellowships, revenue from master's programs and art and external grant funding. In the case of the College of Business and Economics, we do executive education. So finding different sources of revenue to support the research infrastructure, including doctoral education. And then that will enable, just creating competitive packages to attract good students. And then this point touches on what's going to end up being funded centrally and what's going to end up being decentralized under the new budget model. And that's been a big concern to a lot of our colleagues. And the short answer is right now we don't know the answer specifically, but let me say this. In tandem with our working group and the whole strategic planning process, the provost appointed a task force to study the funding of graduate education separately from what we were doing in our strategy. And we've been in communication with that group, and they are looking into, a lot of minutia of how doctoral students in particular are funded, where the money comes from, how much we've been spending, how we spent it. And they're developing recommendations to the provost on how we deal with those allocations in the future. In particular, that will inform the structure of the new budget model, and it should also dovetail nicely with some of the things that we're proposing in our plan. So that process is going along a separate track, but yet we try to communicate with that group periodically, let them know what we're doing. They let us know what they're doing, and I think probably sometime later this month, their recommendations will go to the provost, and that'll inform more fully what we're doing in our part of the plan. And that also will inform the budget model. So, and to what degree, we have central resources for doctoral funding versus those that are decentralized through the budget model. And I think the sentiment that's coming out, that we're hearing about, is that there is a sentiment to keep, and this is coming out of the other working group as well, on the graduate funding, based on my discussions. They don't want everything decentralized, because there is some benefit to having a university level award to attract a new doctoral student. There's a prestige with that. And there's also some elements of quality and diversity of our student body that cut across lots of different academic units and affect the university as a whole. So I think the sentiment that's coming out is that there's going to be some significant portion of funding that's still centrally managed, even under the budget model. But the new budget model is going to give deans and department chairs a lot of latitude in how to structure graduate education at the unit level as befitting the particular circumstances of those units. Growing masters and professional programs. Again, this is in recognition of the trend of increasing masters enrollments to incentivize and encourage development of new master's programs that are going to fill some niches. Hopefully those programs will be able to be priced in such a way that they generate more resources than they cost to deliver, and that those excess resources can then be used to fund other things in the academic units, such as doctoral stipends, fellowships, scholarships, you name it. And again, that's a strategy I'm pursuing in our college aggressively. We've got we just launched an executive MBA program, a joint program with the University of Louisville. There'll be some proposals coming through for a master's program in applied economics, and then a Master of Science program in finance. These latter two programs are one-year programs. They're really designed to be professional programs, not research programs. Right now, we only have two professional master's programs in the college, one in accounting and one in the MBA. But neither of those are really generating resources for the college that I can reinvest. But these others are being priced in such a way that they will generate a surplus. And my intent is to send that out to the departments so that they can build their doctoral programs optimally. And because every market is different. And then as we add these master's programs, as we recognize that doctoral graduates are going to in many cases placements outside of academics, we need to have some more infrastructure to help students succeed and help prepare them for success after graduation. So things like improved advising, career services for graduate students, which in a lot of cases on campus, formal career services are not existent. And then creating incentives for the colleges to provide more enrichment and professional development activities. There are lots of metrics. I'm not going to read through all of these, but there are things under the doctoral education section. I mean, we definitely want our students to publish, to present at conferences, to get grants. We want to attract a high quality and diverse set of graduate students. So these reflect, these metrics reflect some of the actual results of implementing the strategies that we talked about. The master's program quality, again, we'd like to see increased enrollment. We'd like to see some new programs being launched to facilitate that enrollment. And then these are just kind of indicators of the quality of the incoming students and the metrics that indicate their success post-graduation. I will say about these metrics, we've got a list of, you can see it's a long list. I haven't gotten to action 3 yet. That adds even more to the list. We're at the stage of the process right now where we're trying to narrow down these metrics. A lot of them are redundant in some cases, but ultimately we need a much smaller set of metrics to focus on that hopefully will capture most of what we're trying to do. So this long laundry list of metrics is in the process of getting whittled down by each of the working groups, so that we have, for our entire working group, and that entire part of the strategic plan, we may end up with maybe 4 or 5 metrics that we're focusing on with very specific targets that we're shooting for. So right now, we're in the process of just culling through all of these ideas and trying to consolidate and focus on the few that are really going to move the needle. And then for graduate student success, some of the obvious things: starting salaries. What percentage of our students are getting appropriate placement or post-graduation outcomes? Where are they placing? So in the case of research-oriented doctoral students, are they getting jobs at other research universities? We hosted Janet Weiss, who's the graduate school dean at the University of Michigan, for a forum, and she spoke about at University of Michigan, they've begun tracking their doctoral students for 10 years post-graduation. So they know, where they got their first job, if it was a postdoc, how long were they there, where did they go after the postdoc, what are their publications, when did they get tenure, when did they move on to another university. So they're really trying to focus on measuring the impact of their tactics on the actual doctoral outcomes, and that's something that we really took to heart when we heard her talk. Again, more of our students that are working in major research collaboratives, starting up companies, publications. So just numerous indicators of student success that hopefully will be helped by the improved emphasis on career advising and academic advising for graduate students. So I didn't have any interruptions, but thank you for listening. And we're here as long as you want to answer questions. But if you think of something later, a number of mechanisms to get input to our working group. You could send email to seatomorrow@uky.edu. Did I get that right, Hannah? And then that's my email address and Sharon's email address. And whatever you send to us by email, we'll share that with our working group as we continue our work. There's a mechanism up on the strategic planning website for you to provide input based on what you've heard today and what you've read. We welcome that, and whenever anything comes in through that menu, our support team will send that to us, and we will continue to consider those things. The process continues. The president is currently reviewing kind of the initial batch of our work, and he's going to give us feedback on it. We're going to continue working on the plan through the summer, trying to refine, respond to the input we've received from these forums, and this won't be the last time you have an opportunity to weigh in, but we do appreciate getting the feedback. So I will now be silent and answer any questions. Yes, sir. Can you introduce yourself, sir?
Yeah, Joel Frisney. I work at Campus ID. But was there much discussion on online programs or growth in online programs at master's, specialist, or doctoral level, and an idea of enhancing the graduate program or growing the graduate program?
The short answer is yes. There was a lot of discussion about that. I think if you get down into the longer document, you'll see discussion of that and some of those trends. But we didn't want to specifically define for every academic unit, you have to start an online program. So we use the word innovative, market responsive, and that might take different forms for different academic units. But I think it is contemplated that for some units, there is opportunity in the online space. So yes, there's certainly incentive for that too with the budget model. Karen, is there anything you'd like to amplify?
I think you covered it all. Well, I can't think of anything else to add.
Well, we're out of time for lunch, so thank you so much for coming. I appreciate the time, and if you think of something later, use the email. We love getting the input, and I can assure you that everything we get, we look at it, confront it. It either ends up in our document or gets sent to the integration team in the program. So anything you send us, we will make sure that happens. So anyway, thank you for being here today. And thank you.